You have
All right, elbows up.
elbows up.
Mr. David Creighton, how you doing, sir? Yeah, I know.
I'm shaking my head over that clip.
That's a video I made yesterday as I took all the most stupid part of that meeting. I cut them one after the other, and at the end I just said elbows up, elbows up. So that was part of it, but that's how ridiculous that meeting was, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, I did my show about that this morning to some extent, but I'm watching Donald Trump again make a total fool of this guy. And he says, I've made you so popular in Canada. Donald Trump knows the game. He knows the game he's playing, and he knows the game that Mark Carney's playing, that he used Donald Trump to win this election. You remember him calling Donald Trump in a United States an existential threat to Canada? And here he is again, the second time. He's down there basically on his knees. Never mind elbows up, his elbows down and knees on the ground. And he's saying, "You're the most transformational president of my lifetime."
Yep.
And it's incredible. I mean, I think Donald Trump is a transformational president. And I loved it when Donald Trump lectured Mark Carney about transgenderism and how we don't have that shit in this country. We we don't allow little boys to compete in little girl sports. We don't have that crap in this country. And we've moved beyond that. And of course, he's talking to a guy whose daughter is part and parcel of that whole enterprise. He's talking to a guy who advances that woke agenda. And look at Mark Carney's face when he says that. It's tabula rasa. It's like I'm not gonna betray an emotion here, because if I do, Donald Trump might slap my face. If I look like I'm opposed to Donald Trump, he's going to get me. If I look like I'm in favor of Donald Trump, Canadians might slap me in the face. So what a horrible predicament to be in for a horrible human being like Mark Carney, who will say and do whatever he wants to do to be prime minister, to take power, because he didn't believe a word of that about Donald Trump during the election campaign. Donald Trump was never an existential threat to Mark Carney. He wants to get under Mark Carney's shoe, and he wants to be pounded over and over again as long as it keeps him in power. And as long as Donald Trump is the boogeyman for these idiots, these 60-year-olds and over who voted so much in huge numbers for Donald Trump, who somehow think Mark Carney is their savior. What a mixed up, crazy country we have, Nico. It is beyond reason at this point. And I'm just getting started tonight because there's so many other reasons to say this country's finished. Beyond what Mark Carney represents, it's insanity.
I agree with everything you just said. Obviously, it talks to your generation, the baby boomers voted for him because they haven't really felt the last 10 years of liberal policies, right? They're the only ones that actually got away with pretty clean. Not only that, but their house, where most of their equity comes from, have skyrocketed over the past 10 years. So they're okay. That's why they keep on voting for that guy. But I made a video this morning making fun of them, saying, after the second meeting with Trump, you guys need to agree that a vote for Carney was a vote for Trump. So welcome to the MAGA movement. And this is what the liberals voted for. They thought that they actually believed that Trump was a boogeyman when he was elected back in November, took power in January. How do you explain the last 9.5 years of our economy's destruction, of our censorship, of our government going tyrannical 5 years ago? It's just insane that this worked, but they're to blame, right? At the end of the day, they're to blame. But one thing I want to bring up, though, and I was talking about that on my show yesterday, is it's no different on the conservative side, though. If you look at the big C conservative, they think that Pierre Poilievre's their messiah. In the same way as people are looking, the liberals are looking at Carney saying, "Oh, he's gonna save us from the big bad orange man to the south." People are looking at Pierre Poilievre thinking that he's gonna save them when he's been in Parliament this whole time. He hasn't done
Well,
anything. Like he's not protecting us against anything. Is he the best of two evils? Yes.
yeah, he's the best of two evils. But what does that get you? I think
Exactly.
he's the best of two evils. But I had a subscriber or a person who subscribes to my broadcast write me this week on email and said, I have to unsubscribe you because you're constantly criticizing Pierre Polyev. And I said, well, actually, no, I don't constantly criticize Pierre Polyev. I criticize Pierre Polyev when he's wrong, as far as
So
principled
that's
conservatism
constantly.
goes. And not quite. But I also
Oops.
said, I praise Pierre Polyev, and he's right. I said he was right about your home is your castle. He's finally come around to that, and he has said some pretty good things about law and justice issues over the years and recently. And you're right. I said no. Actually, I said you're wrong. He has said nothing about 4 censorship bills in front of the House of Commons. He's got 1 or 2 members of Parliament saying sounds like a bad idea, but he said nothing about them himself. He said nothing about these ostriches being killed. And I know we'll talk about this later, but this is just liberal incompetence, and people are confused about this. He refuses to come down on hard conservative issues, especially globalist issues, because his communications people, and I know this for a fact, are telling him, "Don't do that, Pierre. Just stick to the talking points that lost you the election, and they'll let you another one." So that's exactly what's going on. And I know these people. People say, is Jenny Burns still alive in the Conservative Party? Well, it sure as hell looks like it, because he continually reads the Jenny Burns talking points about everything. And I am sick of hearing about nothing but the deficit. Yeah, it's evil. Yeah, and about bail and jail. Yeah, that's bad too. But if that's all you can talk about in terms of what's wrong with this country, I don't think you realize how bad this country is, because we are on the road right now to absolute dictatorship. We have got 4 censorship bills in the wings, and I don't see any real opposition to it except backbenchers standing up and saying, "No, it's not going to do too well in my writing." I'm sorry, we've got to do a little better than that. We've got to say this is a fight between liberty and slavery.
Yep.
That's what it's come down to. And ironically, the guy who said, "I'm unsubscribing from your station," said, "I would agree with you that we should insist upon conservative principles from Pierre Polyev, but we're in the fight of our lives right now, and I have no time for you." And by the way, he said, "I'm not a patriot." And I said, "F off, buddy. I wore a uniform for 12 years. Did you?" So I'm sick of people coming up to me and saying, "I'm not a patriot because I'm not supporting Pierre Polyev 100% of the time. I'm not supporting the Conservative Party 100% of the time." It's like Ezra Levant told me 20 years, I think it must have been 20 years ago. We go back that far. Ezra said to me, "David, unless we push our politicians to the right, they will inevitably drift to the left. So unless you're pushing our conservative politicians to the right, you're wasting your time." And I still say that today.
You're absolutely right, and that was the whole idea of you and I having a conversation on Wednesdays to say what the fuck is happening with the conservative movement in Canada, because it's not conservative; they're just liberals. They're the equivalent of the Democrats in the US. They're not conservatives. But there's only one person. I don't know if you know that woman personally, if you've ever met her, but Leslyn Lewis. She's the only
Yes.
one that's been because she's talked about C8 and both C8 and C9, and she was bang on. I read those bills and she was 100% bang on. She did an actual solid job in the House of Commons. So I was impressed by her. And just to correct you, Pierre Poilievre did talk about C2, but he didn't talk about the real issues. He didn't say that in Bill C2, it would allow at least the way it stands, because now it's being redone. I don't know if you read that, but it was announced yesterday that they will be retabling C2. They're going to modify it because there's been too many complaints. Like I read earlier that there was like 300 different entities that represents freedom in Canada. They're like, yeah, no, this bill can't pass the way that it is.
No, I didn't say he did, I didn't say he didn't speak about C2. What he's not talking about is C8, C9, and the Online Harms Act, which is coming back. These are the other three pieces of onerous censorship legislation, which he's not talking about. He's got a couple of MPs who are backbenchers talking about these bills because he wants. I know he's getting the letters, and he wants to say, just a minute now. Somebody's talking about this. Just a minute. Who is it? So that's what's going on.
And you can see that it already started. I don't know if you saw the post that Maxime Bernier did this week. No, it was last week. We had him on the show a couple of days ago to talk that the leader of one of the native association, AFN, I think, from memory, they are complaining to the police for hate crime on Maxime Bernier's post about the Day of Reconciliation last week, which we read it on the show. I'm like, wow, I said a lot worse than he did, but it's already started, right? Oh, I'm sure you have. Anybody that's somewhat a Christian is like, bullshit. Like, what the hell are you talking about? But all to say that right now they don't have any power, but it's already started. Like, people are already trying to go after a guy like, let's say, Maxime Bernier for hate crime. Imagine if Bill C8, C9, C63 actually pass as law. That's going to land you in prison. And I absolutely agree with you that Pierre Poilievre needs to talk about it. And I don't understand how the big C conservatives in Canada are giving him a pass time and time again, when the only thing I want to come out of his mouth right now is censorship is coming. If those bills pass, the next thing that's coming is digital IDs, just like the UK is doing. They need those bills to be passed in order to be able to censor us. And we're going to talk about Tamara Lich and Barber's sentencing yesterday. But we covered it live yesterday for almost 3 hours. And, one of the things I kept on saying is, can you imagine if 3 years ago when the Convoy was happening, if they had Bill C8 and Bill C9 in place, they would have been able to can it from the get-go. They could have cut the internet to anybody that was talking about this, that was planning about standing up to the government. They could have killed the movement from the get-go. And another thing that people don't understand, I come from technology. I was in telecommunications for 20 years. And one of the things that they're now capable of doing with applications like Palantir, for example, is geofencing. So they literally could, taking Wellington in Ottawa, where all the truckers were, they could check all the cell phones that were available, just build what we call a geofence around it, check whoever is inside of it, find the cell phone, find the telecommunication company they're dealing with, and then send them notice to cut their internet. That's how easy it would have been with Bill C8 to can the Freedom Convoy from the get-go. Nobody would have had an internet access. And imagine that you have digital IDs attached to that. That means they could have debanked you right there from just your cell phone. Having your cell phone within a geofence, which is just a virtual fence that you just put around a map and say, whoever's in that area, pull the information, cell phone, IP addresses, and telecommunication companies, and we'll silence those people. It's insane. People don't realize what's happening, yet Pierre Poilievre is not talking about this. This is what is absolutely evil about Bill C2, C8, C9, and wait till we see Bill C63, the new version that's going to be dropped by Guilbeault soon enough, because he announced it, a week and a half ago, that it was coming back. So that's going to be ugly.
I'm glad we're on the same page on this, but it's interesting. Your background is in telecommunications. My background is in communications, of course, public relations for the Air Force, for Parliament Hill, journalism. So I think we're aptly suited to work with each other on what's coming here. But if I was Pierre Poilievre right now, I wouldn't be too worried about the fact that deficit is there because the deficit is going to get higher and higher and higher. And
Yep.
Mark Carney doesn't give a damn about the deficit. Pierre Poilievre should be worried about the fact within 6 months we could have no free speech in this country, none at all,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
that will affect Pierre Poilievre too. And
Mhm.
this is what he doesn't seem to realize. It's not just going to affect those idiots on the airwaves he doesn't like. And there's a lot of people out there I don't like either. But I'm saying, go ahead. I go ahead. Say it. Say it. Say your crazy things because I believe in free speech. But Pierre Poilievre is looking at this like a typical politician. He's saying, well, it's going to get rid of those extremists out there. But it won't affect me. It won't affect the Conservative Party of Canada. Of course it will. That will be the next step. Any authoritarian, totalitarian government starts with the worst offenders and then works inward. And that's what's going to happen. Pierre Poilievre will suddenly find out, I'm sorry, Pierre, that speech has not been approved by the Prime Minister's office. You can't read that. Since when? Well, I'm sorry, you didn't speak out loud enough about Bill C8, C9 and the Online Arms Act. And that's exactly what he needs to be worried about. He's not thinking big picture, Nico. He's thinking, well, I'm going to bring this government down on the deficit. Like hell he is. The Liberals have got the NDP and the Bloc in lockstep with them right now. There's not going to be an election at least for another 6 months to a year. Pierre Poilievre needs to worry, even if he's just a politically astute animal. And it used to be, but it doesn't seem to be anymore. He needs to be worried about that February vote, about his leadership as the Conservative Party leader. And I don't even know if he's going to pass that at this point. If he keeps saying the only thing I want to talk about is the deficit and jail, not crime, jail, not crime. I'm sorry, the time is up here. If you don't get on the real issues here, and he has no inclination to do that right now. And I'm sorry if people want to say that's too negative, David. You shouldn't be saying negative things about our poor Pierre. I don't give a damn at this point. I am fighting for my freedom and your freedom, Nico. And the poor idiot out there who's saying, David, you shouldn't be criticizing Pierre because at one point you're not going to be allowed to express your opinions either.
It's very hard for me to believe that Pierre Poilievre is not controlled opposition when he continues avoiding the real problems in Canada. Every time I see him, like just today, he was making jokes in the House of Commons again. And I'm like, what are you doing? How are you not flipping tables? How are you not flipping tables? If I was an MP right now, I would get arrested for swearing and breaking tables. People would have to drag me out of the House of Commons because Bill C2, C8, C9, and C63 will be the death of Canada. I don't think people understand that once those are in place, digital IDs are just a matter of time. And digital IDs are the point of no return. If you stack AI behind that, Palantir, people need to look into software's Palantir. What it can do to us is insane, is absolutely insane. We can literally be in an electronic prison as soon as digital IDs are linked to biometrics and banking information. As soon as this is done, we're screwed. We're absolutely screwed. And yet, like it was mentioned in the comment, the first person that's really talking about it in Canada is Danielle Smith, and that blows my mind. That blows my mind that she's the first one to try to bring that up in Alberta.
Now, it doesn't blow my mind because she's the only really principled conservative leader in Canada. And I think we've talked about this before. I had Jeff Rath on my show earlier this week, and he was going on and on about Danielle Smith doesn't get it, Danielle Smith, and I said, look, Jeff, she is doing everything she can in a very difficult position, and she has my 100% support, even though I don't live in Alberta, but I love what she's doing as a conservative leader. I'll continue to love what she's doing. She's coming on my show in the next week to talk about stuff because I've known her for a long time. And as far as I'm concerned, she represents what's left of the Conservative Party in Canada, whether it's small c or large c. But you're quite right. I can't watch Question Period. I record it every morning. I get up every morning and I record the day beforehand. I say, can I use this on the show today? And I say, I just can't do it because it's the same BS. We've got Pierre standing up and there's a huge standing ovation for him. And he asks the same damn question every day that I've heard 100 times before. And he gets the same damn answer from the liberals. And it's like, are they playing together on this? Of course they are. And I worked on the Hill for God help me, 6, 7, 8 years. I can't remember how long it was. It's like a blackout now. But I worked on the Hill for many years, and it was like every day they were all keyed up for question period, like the whole nation was watching. And it finally turned out to me. I used to watch question period with a bunch of my friends, and we'd say, the only people who watch question period are the MPs, staffers, and shut-ins. Nobody watches this anymore because they know it's a farce. It's like we get up and we ask nonsensical questions, we get nonsensical answers, and it's all a farce. Nothing ever changes. And this is why I don't even want to play the crap anymore, because it's the same nonsense every day from both sides. Non-questions, non-answers. And we need something different in this country, Nico, or I tell you, it's going to burst.
To me, the House of Commons has become the exact same thing as the WWE. It's two actors standing up, saying dumb stuff, saying entertaining stuff to keep the crowd entertained. Same in the same way as the Romans did with the games, bread and wine. Keep the people entertained and they won't ask any questions. At least no questions that are worth asking. And just I look at Google Trend all the time, right, to see what topics I should be talking about. And I look at Google Trend both in Canada and in the US. It's all about sports. It's always all about sports. Like, especially now, hockey's about to start again. You're going to have, even in Canada, there's a lot of soccer. In the US, yesterday, when I looked in the morning, every single item in the top 10 were games in football. I'm like, really? That is what people are looking for. And unfortunately, what was true in Roman times is still true today. You just need to give entertainment to people, allow them to drink, smoke, and they're never going to ask real questions. And that's what we're seeing right now. And add to what we're talking about, the gun grab that's going on right now too, right? The gun grab started in Cape Breton, but that's a gun grab. It's not a gun buyback. It's a gun grab. 100%. I'm a gun owner. Those are gun grab, and they can all suck it. They can all suck my nuts. They're not taking my guns. I can tell you that much. They can all fuck off. They're not touching that shit. It's my no. Sorry, not sorry. Oh, bro, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. But the thing is that at the end of the day, it's up to us to stand up to what they're saying, to be able to talk about this.
This is a nice transition here, because the gun grab, for instance, Katie Passetne, who I've really come to know and like so much from Universal Ostrich Farms, and I introduced her to Clayton and Natalie Morris, and she's been on Redacted several times, doing a fantastic job defending her farm. And Clayton Morris asked her the other day, because they've literally got these drones from the RCMP flying down, terrorizing not just the birds, the ostriches, but the people on the farm. And Clayton said, "Can you shoot them down? Can you shoot the drones down?" And Katie said, "Well, no, we can't, because if we did that, it's a federal offense." And I thought, Katie, it's not just a federal offense. You haven't got the guns anymore because the federal government is taking your guns away. So is there a concerted plan here with what's going on at Universal Ostrich Farms? Is this emblematic of what the Liberal government wants to do to the whole country? Yes, because first of all, they're taking away your guns, even the guns the farmers have owned for decades that they use. They don't go out and shoot people. They don't go out and rob banks with them. They defend their property against animals. This is what they use them for. And what the federal government wants to do is take away those guns, because, my God, they might be able to use them at some point when they're attacked by the federal government. And this is what this farm is being, this is what's playing out in front of people's eyes right now. This is why I say, I still get people writing to me every day saying, I don't quite get it, David. I don't really think the ostriches are that important. And I'm saying it's just not the ostriches. It's your own goddamn life, fella. It's about you. The government's coming for you someday. If they'll come for 399 ostriches and they'll take away livelihood and livestock from farmers, if they'll occupy a farmer's field and say, get the hell out of here, we own it, they're going to come to your property next. And I've been saying this since nobody else was interested in this story last May. People said, oh, it's an animal rights story. I don't think it's very conservative. I said, it's not just an animal rights story. It's a human rights story. It's about property. It's about the sanctity of property. It's about the sanctity of having a livelihood that the government can't take away. And I have fought for this story for 5 months. I don't pretend to be objective about it any more than I was objective about the Freedom Convoy. But I am fighting for this family farm right now as hard and as fast as Katie is, because I think if we lose this, we lose a plank in terms of what this country is still about. And this country used to be about private property and freedom. And we're not about that anymore.
One of the things about guns too that we forget, well, there's two things we forget about guns. Yes, they're great for self-defense, no questions about it. Absolutely, no questions about it. But this country wouldn't exist, North America wouldn't exist if it wasn't for guns. People don't realize showing up here hundreds and hundreds of years ago in the wilderness, fighting creatures like bears, you weren't fighting bears with your hands. You needed guns to hunt. And that's one thing I came to realize recently is the attack on guns that we're seeing in Canada is not just about self-defense. It's about being able to provide for yourself without relying on whatever becomes available in the grocery store. Because if you look at what the WEF and the WHO wants, they want us to eat synthetic meat. They don't want us to eat real animals anymore. They want us to eat the bugs. So if you don't have guns to go hunting, you don't have a choice to follow whatever the government gives you, because that's another thing why they're going after the guns. It's not just to defend yourself like in the Second Amendment in the US, where you're capable of defending yourself if your government goes tyrannical, but it also means that you can't feed yourself. And this country wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the fact that we had guns available to defend ourselves, but also to hunt.
No, that is integral to Canadian society. And people who don't live off the land, people who live in urban settings, don't understand that because that's not part of their experience. And this is a war right now against agriculture. It's a war against farmers. It's a war against rural people. And we have to realize that.
I agree with you 1,000%. That's what we had Katie on the show last Saturday, and that's one of the things I asked her. Do you think that what's happening to your farm is yet the continuation of the attack that we're seeing on farmers as a whole? Like, people don't understand this, but right now in Canada, we have less cattle. There's less beef available right now than there were in the 1980s, yet we're way more people than we used to be, and the technology should have made it easier over time for us to have more. Yet there's less cattle available than they were 40 years ago, which is absolutely insane. There is an attack going on farms, and that's what I see going on with Katie's farm or the BC ostrich farm. Is there's an attack on farmers. However you feel about that whole avian flu thing, you can remove that from the equation and just say they're trying to go after farmers, because she's not the only case, but she's standing up. She's standing up to it, and she's become, man, worldwide attention. And I'm curious to see how it's going to fall, because I thought that it was yesterday that we're supposed to hear the decision, right? Wasn't it the decision supposed to be given by the Supreme Court yesterday?
There's been no indication about that at all.
No, that's my point. I had heard that it could be on the 7th, but there's supposedly nothing has been announced yet, so we don't even know what's going on.
the longer that goes on, the better for the farm, because the public
Yeah.
relations is horrible for the Carney government, for the CFIA, which Katie has renamed the Canadian Cruelty to Animals Agency.
Mhm.
That's exactly what it's done. It is a horrible agency. It's nothing but a roving mobile death squad, and that's what they're all about. And it's time, as Katie says, it's time to remove it and rebuild it. It's become a corrupt organization, and I can't say enough about it. That's negative.
What else did you want to bring up for? Because we're gonna finish with the sentencing yesterday, but I know you always have something to say about the BC, about the ostrich farm. So was there something you wanted to add before we go down the rabbit hole of what happened with the sentencing yesterday?
Well, I talked to Katie yesterday, and I am just so disgusted at how the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, has moved from basically faceless bureaucrats in a building in Ottawa to a roving mobile death squad, and that's what they are now. And it shocked me when I got involved in the story to find out what this bureaucratic organization has become. Because I really thought, well, they're innocuous at the best of times, but they're not innocuous. They are clearly designed now to go after farmers. They're a death squad going after farmers' livelihood and livestock. But even more than that, I really believe they are totally aligned with the globalist agenda of the United Nations under the World Health Organization. And and if you look, and even the mainstream media is reading the lines correctly on this. They say, well, why did the CFIA wanted to stamp out, which of course is another word from the World Health Organization? Why do they want to stamp out all of these ostriches, like they've stamped out all kinds of other livelihood across the country? Because they're in accordance with a World Health Organization mandate. It's got nothing to do with Canadian law. And this is why they want to bury this story. They want the story to go away. They don't want to be held accountable for what's happening in British Columbia. Because if people say, just a minute, what's your justification for doing this? They don't have an answer. Because when you say, well, test the animals, are they healthy? No, we can't do that. Well, no, we can't test them. Why? Well, they weren't healthy 9 months ago, so therefore we can't test them today. Why? Well, the policy says we have to stamp them out. Where does the policy come from? The World Health Organization. That's where the policy comes from. And so Canada's not in control of its agricultural or health policies. The United Nations is. And this is why they don't want to be held accountable. And this is why, frankly, they can go onto somebody's private property, take over their land, take over their livestock, destroy their livelihood, and then start being cruel to the land, to the animals, because they're not held accountable by Canadian law. They're not, because they don't have to answer to Canadian law. They're answering to international globalist law. And this occurred to me very early in this. I said, okay, so why are we doing this? And Katie said, well, it's got nothing to do with Canadian law. It's international law. It's globalist law. We're adhering to the World Health Organization. And I said, so all the dots are connecting. This is why Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau are just watching the other way, because we're just adhering to globalist doctrine. And this is why we need to stand up against this and say, enough is enough. No, we will not do this anymore. We are going to fight back on this issue. And I think it's imperative that we do.
And we need to stop seeing them as different issues as well, because the censorship bill, the gun grab, what's going on with the ostrich farm, they're all interconnected. They're not independent silos. They're stages in the same building. There are floors in the same building. They're all interconnected. They're all doing it at the same time because they want an end result that we're not going to like. The end result being what the WEF and the WHO want. And for the people out there that believes that that's a conspiracy theory, Mark Carney was the UN special envoy for climate change. Why do you think he's always talking about it to this day? Read his book, Values. He wants every financial decision to be taken based on climate change. He wants that to be a factor in every single financial decisions that we're taking. And he was part of the WEF. He still is part of the WEF, and he's a proud globalist banker. That is who we have as a prime minister. And if you look, I can't remember which one. I know that in Bill C2, it's Bill C2 and Bill C8. They want to give power to bureaucrats to be able to do what our police is doing right now, to be able to obtain. In C2, they want bureaucrats to be able to obtain warrants without a police officer. They want them to be able to go to the court and get warrants directly. So they are given more and more power to bureaucrats in Bill C2, Bill C8, and Bill C9. They're literally saying that you don't need the Crown Attorney anymore to press charges against somebody for hate crimes, something that is more than disdain. Something that is more than disdain. The police officer has the right to arrest me and press charges because I hurt somebody's feeling more than dislike. It has to be disdain. We want less and less restrictions put on public workers when, look at our history. When have they ever worked in our favor? Tell me, in the past 10 years.
They've never worked in our favor. And this is exactly where we're going with all of these laws. It's increasing tyranny, increasing government control over our lives, over what we do, what we see, what we say, what we speak. And this is almost beyond what George Orwell predicted in 1984. But if you can't see where this country's going and why Australia and the United Kingdom and all of these old democracies are all moving in the same direction at the same time, then I would suggest you're not very swift. You have to acknowledge that this is all happening at the same time. It's like Canada right now is catching up to these other countries. So we're catching up to Great Britain, which is throwing people in prison at an incredible rate for what they say and what they might be thinking. And the Online Harms Act, if this is reintroduced as in its old form, and I think it will be, this is a bill that has a thought crimes component that is truly frightening. This will be the first time in history outside of a novel that we are going to jail people for what they're thinking, not what they're doing.
And the scariest part of this whole thing is that Orwell couldn't have seen that coming. He couldn't have seen the type of technology that was developed, because remember, in the book, there's TVs everywhere. There's screens everywhere. We don't even need to have screens everywhere. We carry them in our pockets. They're always around us. But another thing that people need to understand is, have you ever seen a Minority Report with Tom Cruise?
Yes.
You know, they had 3 precogs that were able to predict the future. This they got wrong because we have AI now. And with platforms like Palantir and the fact that our government records every piece of information that is ever passed through our networks, especially the US with the NSA, they will be able to use AI platform to predict people's action. We have so much of our behavior online that they can all analyze it, and they can eventually predict, at least try to predict what we can do. So we're seeing a mashup of 1984 with technology that he couldn't have honestly thought of. Obviously, that was written in 1948 or released in 1948. And then you mix it with Minority Report, the precogs that don't even need to be humans. They're going to be AI. They're going to be able to predict. That's the next step. That would not surprise me that that's the intent of softwares like Palantir, to be able to predict certain people's behavior and accuse them of crime of pre-crimes, like they call it in Minority Report, or thought crimes as they talk it as they refer to it in 1984. Sorry, in Minority Report they call it pre-crime. But all to say, we can bring that up with what happened yesterday with Tamara Lynch and Chris Barber. Like, this was yesterday. All I'm going to say about this is going to be very simple. This was the government reminding us that if we dare to stand up, there's going to be consequences. Yesterday was a show of force to say that we will crush dissent. We will not allow you to get away with things that we don't like, because Tamara Lynch and Chris Barber should have been able to go home with no consequences whatsoever, with even an apology from the government for the past 3 years that they've had to go through in and out of court, being hassled by the government and being, man, the type of comments that's everywhere online regarding those two on the left is insane. I don't think people understand the amount of stress that put on themselves and their families. But man, yesterday was, again, that was a joke. They went for their pound of flesh. They got it. There's no reason they should have any type of consequences for what they did, considering that Free Palestine protests are happening on that same fucking street, Wellington, in Ottawa, literally every weekend. They don't care. They show up. They're protected by the police. And did you see that a couple of weeks ago, all the tickets that they received at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, for being too loud, they all got thrown out. So none of them are going to have to pay the fines that they received. But yet yesterday in the court ruling, they brought up the honking and how disturbing it was for people in Ottawa that the truckers were honking their horns. But if you're Free Palestine, you get a free pass. Once again, the noise that you make after hours, it's not a problem because they like them. Those are their voter base. Two-tier system was exposed yesterday in the sentencing yet again, and people on the left are just like, I don't see it. Absolutely insane what happened yesterday.
No, it is. And I don't know where to begin, because I got there at 10 o'clock in the morning. Judge Perkins McVeigh was late as usual. She always sort of saunters in at 10:30 when everybody's there. It was standing room only, except there's no standing room. And if you arrive too late, the police tell you to get out. But it was full, totally full, to literally person to person in that courtroom. 75%, I would say, were supporters of Tamara and Chris. The other 25% were media. And I would say of that media, and I'm not including the crackpot media that sometimes shows up for these things, but the mainstream media and the truly independent and new media who were there, 25% of the group. And it was incredible, just incredible, because we sat there for literally from 10:30 till 1:30 with 2 breaks to find out what the fate of was Chris Barber and Tamara Leach. And when I heard that Chris was not going to jail, she first read out Chris's sentencing and saying he was 12 months house arrest, 6 months curfew. And then we went on a break. It's like I said, what the hell is going on here? He's like a drama queen. But we went on a break, and then she brought us all back, and then she read the results for Tamara: 12 months house arrest, 5.5 months curfew. And my initial reaction to all of this was, well, thank God they're not going to jail, because I literally have been steeped in this trial now for 2 years and a month. When it all started, the day after Labor Day weekend, 2 years ago, when I first sat down for this trial. And I was grateful to God, not to the judge, but to God, that Chris Barber was not going to jail and Tamara Leach was not going to jail, because it could have come to that. So my initial reaction was to say, thank God it didn't happen. And a lot of people immediately went out there and they said, yeah, this is a travesty of justice and this is horrible. And yes, of course it's horrible. It's horrible that these people went it to trial at all. It's
Mhm.
horrible we had a trial of 2 years and a month for people who were politically protesting the liberal regime. Of course it's horrible, but it's good news that people like you and I pushed back over the last 2 years to ensure that they did not get sent to the gulag for 2 years. And that's how I am choosing to look at this. I work damn hard. I wrote 45 articles over the last 2.5 years talking about this trial, not just in Canada and not just for 15 people who read it, but for millions of people who read it in the United States for the publications I work for. I wrote articles for the Epoch Times. I wrote articles for Human Events. I wrote articles for the Post Millennial. I wrote articles for my own Substack. I wrote articles for a myriad of publications to get the word out about what was happening to these two freedom fighters in Canada. And we cannot let them suffer in jail. So I take some heart from the fact that that didn't happen, because believe me, it could have been worse. The government could have thrown these people in jail and said, go ahead, make my day, because that's the kind of government we have in this country. Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were viewed from the very beginning by this government as political dissidents.
Mhm.
This was a show trial from the very beginning, even though this is the funny thing that people don't seem to get. This was not a federal trial, it was a provincial trial. And Doug Ford has hid behind this from day one, pretending that, oh, it's Trudeau put them on trial. And Marxist Carney is keeping them on trial. No, Doug Ford, you put them on trial. They are charged with provincial offense in a provincial courthouse. And this is your travesty, Doug Ford. Doug Ford, who pretends to have a Ford nation. What is it, a nation of cowards? That's what your Ford nation is. And now Doug Ford wants to take away the truck from Chris Barber. That's the next thing here. And we might not get a resolution on that till at least November at some time. But that's, once again, this is Doug Ford acting like a communist, not a conservative. Maybe that's what that's what the C in PC stands for, Progressive Communist Party. But that's who's moving against Chris Barber in this case. And this has always been about the unholy alliance between Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford. Doug Ford was the first provincial premier to jump on side with Justin Trudeau when he invoked the Emergencies Act. He went on Twitter. I think it was still called Twitter in those days, and said, "Good for you, Justin. Get these bastards because they're nothing but scum." And that's what Doug Ford was all about, and that's what Doug Ford is all about today. He's a phony conservative, and this is why we have to face down these people who are trying to destroy this farm in British Columbia, because now it's the federal government in action. This is what's going on right now. It's not the BC government, as much as I loathe them, as much as I can't stand David Eby and his communist government. This is the Marxist Carney government acting against farmers in BC, and they'll go against farmers in Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and anywhere else that Mark Carney thinks he has to impose his authority. So that's why I'm totally, totally in favor of what's going on here in BC with Katie and her fight back, her pushback, and her desire to fight for freedom.
Well said. I'm just shaking my head. My neck's hurting a bit, though. I agreed with you a tiny bit too much on that speech. That was a good rant, but I agree. But I agree with you. We really just need, Canadians as a whole need to understand what's actually happening, and they're not siloed. All the stories we talked about today, they're all connected. They're not siloed. We need to put two and two together and understand that they're attacking us from every single angle. And there's a good reason why there's censorship and surveillance in Bill C2, C8, C9, and Bill C63. They didn't give us a big fuck you, big brother bill. They chose to separate everything and put it into 4 different bills so it doesn't seem that bad individually. Because how many people out there did like me and read every single page of those bills? Because Bill C2 is 140 pages. I think it was Bill C8 is 110. Bill C9 is almost nothing. It's like 10 page. And Bill C63, I don't even remember. But all to say that we don't read those bills anymore, which we should, obviously. Because if you put them all, I want to create a document where I'm going to link them all together. Because they're going to be referencing one thing from the other bill, like what's the definition of a hate that's being introduced in Bill C9. That's going to be brought back in Bill C8. You know, it's going to be brought back in Bill C63. It's absolutely insane what's going on. But we need to wake up to the fact that those 4 bills combined, plus the gun grab, plus what's happening in BC with those ostriches is all connected. They're not separate events. They're all connected, and they have nothing to do with conservatives versus liberals. It's not a left versus right. It's a top versus bottom issue. Those are not political issues. Those are human issues, as you said at the beginning. Those are things that will affect every single Canadian, no matter who you believe whatever your political affiliations might be.
Well, I have to tell you at this point, I just got a text from Katie, and I can't elaborate too much, but she is in great difficulty right now, literally as we speak. And I can't elaborate more than that, but the animals are fine, but the government is coming down harder than ever on this farm, and she's got more problems to deal with. So it confirms to me that this government wants to make an example of this farm and these farmers. And it's incredible how the mainstream media has joined them in this cause. They really think that there's nothing they have to do except report lies and untruth and half-truth and half-baked reality. Anything except ask the question about why these animals shouldn't be tested. Not a single agency, not a single mainstream agency in Canada has asked that question of the CFIA. And this will kill you, because one of the chief spokeswomen for the CBC on this issue has been a Dr. Angela Rasmussen. And I encourage viewers to look up Angela Rasmussen on X, and you will see exactly who she is. She is in her own words, a cheerleader, quote unquote, for vaccines. And she has been on CBC repeatedly trying to pretend she has no skin in this game at all. Absolutely none. She's a completely impartial spokeswoman. And Ian Hannamansing, CBC Vancouver, I think he might be doing the national news now. I haven't watched CBC in literally 20 years. He introduces her as the completely impartial observer of what's going on this farm. And she's the same woman who my good friend David Freiheit, Viva Frei, he asked her to come on his show for a discussion or a debate on these issues. And she said, I'm not meeting with David Freiheit. That guy is a right-wing extremist who's leading the United States down into right-wing tyranny. And she admitted at that point that she's not even a Canadian. She's an American citizen. So why is she on the air on CBC, which I think used to stand for Canadian Broadcasting Company? She's on the air every day agitating against Canadian farmers. So what's going on here, folks? There's something sinister going on here. And CBC I've called them out several times. They had a fact check edition on a couple of months ago. They brought somebody over from the UK because they couldn't even find a Canadian to do the show. They brought a UK person on there who talked about the birds. The birds are dangerous. We have to kill the birds. She went on and on like this. The whole show was BS. I featured the show on with Katie and David Freiheit, and we all laughed at it because it's just absolute nonsense. But the CBC is invested in government control because they still believe, and I hope they're right, that Pierre Poilievre wants to disband the CBC, sell it off to private ownership or privatize it or something other than what it is. I hope he's still serious about that, because if he is, that to me is a good reason to vote for him. But I think he needs to stand up for that one again.
Unfortunately, during the election, he went to Tout le monde en parle, the biggest show in Quebec. Like, it's a late night, how could you call it? I guess we can call it a talk show. It's late night. It's all in French. He said in French that he would not shut down Radio-Canada, which is part of CBC, because it's part of Canadian heritage. So he wants to somewhat defund CBC, not completely defund it. Yes. He wants to remove the C at the end, but he wants to keep the CB at the beginning. We'll have to talk about that again, but David, an hour flies. Thank you again for doing this. I always enjoy your conversation, so hopefully we're here next week, but thanks for being here. Guys in the audience, if you like the stream, make sure to like, make sure to reshare, make sure to comment. We want to know what you think about this, because this is a problem we're all going to have to face together, no matter your political affiliations. But if you like the talk, like, comment, share, subscribe, and we will see you next week.
All right. Thank you so much, Nico. It's been a pleasure. Love to be here, and we will be here next week.
I'll hold you to that. See you next week, guys.